Yeah.
Okay, we'll do it that way. Jai Ma, Jai Ma.
Jai Ma Guruji.
Swamiji, it's recording now, okay?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
Okay, Jai Ma. I've lost a button where you can mute everybody, so I ask you. Oh, I found it. We can start going. Okay. Jai Ma. Shri Guru Maharaj Ji ki Jai. Om Mangalam Gurudevaya Devye Matriksha Mangalam Mangalam Bhakta Brindebhyo Sarva Lokaya Mangalam Om Stapakaya Chadharmasya Sarva Dharma Sarupini Avatar Varishtaya Ramakrishnaya Te Namaha Om Sarashiva Samarambam Shankarachara Majamam Ashmarachara Prayantam Vande Gurum Paramparam Guru Brahma Guru Vishnu Guru Devo Maheshwara Guru Devo Param Brahman Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Om Bhadrakali Namo Nityam Saraswati Namo Namaha Vira Viranta Viran Vira Viranta Viranga Vidyastane Vevacha Shri Ganesha Sharada Guru Bhyo Namaha Hari Om Hari Om Hari Om Hari Om Jai Ma. Welcome everybody. Continuing our discussions on the Devi Gita from the Srimad Devi Bhagavatam. Last week we gave a little introduction to the tradition of the Puranas, to a little bit of the history of the Srimad Devi Bhagavatam itself, from which this text derives, as pulled from, and then a little bit of the history of the importance of this text as a major Sanskrit development of in the goddess tradition and the Shakti tradition. And then we went through just a few verses. I think we only got 2 verses in, and so we'll pick up where we left off. We're starting with verse 3. But I wanted to bring a few. Let me bring up the verses that we talked about so far. Let's see here. I imagine you can see that. Okay, let's go back to where we were here. The 2 verses we talked about. One is so the king Janamejaya, he asked sage Vyasa in the part of a previous conversation. He said, "You said earlier that supreme lustrous power manifested itself on the crest of the Himalayan mountains. This you mentioned only in passing. Now explain it to me in full detail." And then this beautiful verse, "What thoughtful person would ever tire in drinking the nectarine tales of Shakti? Death comes even to those who drink divine ambrosia, the amrita that the gods drink, but not to one who hears these acts of hers." This is what we begin to talk about. As I was thinking a little bit, how do we understand these acts of her? What are we listening to? And in our other kind of course that we're giving simultaneously, we've been talking a little bit on the textual tradition of Shaktism in our other course, our previous class. We talked a little bit about this Shabda Pramana, this tradition of the authoritative scriptural or authoritative information from about divine things, and the Puranas are in that tradition. They don't have the same authority as the Vedas, of course, Even they usually themselves don't claim the same authority as the Vedas, although sometimes the Puranas are described as the fifth Veda, the Mahabharata is the fifth Veda. That's a very rhetorical device when you declare your text to be the fifth Veda, to be equal to or something like this. And the Purana, this Purana itself is understood as the fifth Veda in a certain sense. But it itself will, Devi herself in it will make the claim that this is not a Veda, and that when a contradiction happens between Purana and Veda or Tantra and Veda, we accept Veda. So it's a very, in that sense, an orthodox sounding text. But it's still authoritative in the sense that it's coming down, it's attributed to a great scriptural authority, spiritual authority of Vyasa, right? The great ancient sage. It's attributed to and believed in kind of more of a faith tradition approach to it. These are conversations that happened thousands of years ago between sages and kings, and the stories that were told in this conversation between the sage and a king, our sage here in Vyasa, are about even more ancient stories. These stories are already old stories, believed to have been told a long time ago, thousands of years ago, perhaps 1,000 years ago for sure. Maybe the belief is that this conversation, if it happened historically, I mean, if you put it in the timeline, it's claimed to be thousands of years ago, just after the Mahabharata war. But it talks about, that's kind of the frame story, but it's introducing and these tales of Shakti that are going to be described in the next verse as very ancient. And so we're already talking ancient time now. What's very ancient? Here it's ancient as in like the beginning of the world, right? Before creation or in the heavenly realm. So it's dealing with mythic themes, right? Very ancient stories. The Puranas are going to be full of these type of stories, which we now may describe as mythological, right? Dealing with other worlds, previous worlds, like this. The things that happen not on Earth, but things that are happening in the heavens or in the hellish realms, right? This is one of the terms that's going to be used is in the three-tiered universe, right? So it's information from other parts of the world, other like that. So how do we take this, right? And so I always wanted to, and so part of my goal in this course, in this class, is to go through the verses of the course and we can get a deeper understanding both of the text and this tradition, but also information for our own spiritual life, hopefully. I find this text extremely informative and illuminating for my own spiritual understanding development. But also, you know, as part of the Ramakrishna Seminary, also we also want to get a little bit of training on exegesis and hermeneutics. How do we interpret things? What are the principles to understand text? So I want to just introduce a few ideas, and then and we'll see how those that we can. I mean, throughout these classes, we'll introduce more and more, right, of principles of hermeneutics and interpretation, right. So one of the terms that we use, that's used in the classical Sanskrit literature, is vidhi. That's V-I-D-H-I, right? And the vidhi is like, I don't know. The problem is that vidhi is how do you interpret something? I don't even know how to interpret the word vidhi, right? But it's used in Vedanta, Mimamsa, to understand what a verse means, how to properly understand a verse or a word or a theme in order so that rituals could be properly practiced, so that the rituals could be effective. What does the text say, how to do a particular rite in the proper way? So if we don't understand what's being said and how it's being said, we won't know how to do the rite properly. As the rites are no longer the most important part of the Vedic tradition and the Tantric tradition, Puranic traditions, this type of interpretation of vidhi has come down considerably. And the term has then become broadened, right, to include statements. It's now not just in how rituals perform, but statements about the absolute truth, about Brahman, about the nature of the soul, or Jivatman, the nature, the meaning of life, the proper course of action for living a good life, for promoting human flourishing, you know, think dharma, meditation, spiritual life, that which now the interpretation is not just on how to perform a ritual. Interpretation is what's the meaning for, what's the spiritual meaning, how to live a spiritual life, what's being told like this, right? So any text that's under discussion, right, has to be analyzed to find out what its vidhi is, what its implications in a certain way, we can say, as we're approaching a little bit, for esoteric knowledge, right? What is the spiritual meaning here, right? For our action, our new interpretation of ritual action, of devotional action, of yogic practice like this, right? Right. And so there's an example that's used in the classical literature, like many people are at tomorrow, day after tomorrow is holy, important Vaishnava holiday. So we're thinking of Chaitanya and Krishna and Narsingha right now. So the classic story in the Śrīmad Bhagavatam, it's part of the holy tradition also. All of you probably already know this, where Krishna, the gopis worshiping Ma Katyayani in order to get Krishna as their husband. They were bathing and leaving their clothes on the bank of the river. Krishna came, it said it's cold, came and stole the vastra, their clothes, and went into a tree. Went into a tree, and each gopi had to come out and naked and to get their clothes back. Now that story is a very fascinating story. I've actually found even ancient references to that actual practice as a dating type of practice, of the marriage proposal in like Japanese culture and things like that. So it's interesting. There may even be an historical actual practice of that, where one would, in order to, before getting married, one would have to pretend to go bathing with their girlfriend and then step out of the river and get their clothes back or get something from the suitor. There may be even some ancient history like that. But generally, so this must have some meaning, right? So what's the vidi is given in the commentaries, that in that story, Krishna represents or is God or the Supreme Purusha, right? To use the Sankhya type there, and the gopis represent the jivatmas, the individual souls, right? And the way of surrender, sharanagati or prapti, is being illustrated in the story. They have to give up everything, go beyond shame, beyond body consciousness, individuality, right? And surrender to the Lord, right? And so the ancient commentaries on this section describe the Bhagavatam will describe that the details of the story are not primary. The meaning is God, the soul has to go beyond its individuality, or it's beyond its body identification, its ego identity, and surrender to the Lord, right? So that's the core meaning. Of course, we believe, I mean, we can go to Vrindavan and see where this happened and bathe in that happened. You can, these things are where myth and meaning and mysticism hit history and geography, right? It's all very interesting how it all puts together. But the getting lost in some of the details, right? I mean, the detail, which that's not the right way to say it. I love the details. This class is about all these wonderful details, right? But to keep in mind what's the spiritual import, the vidi being described here, is more important, perhaps. And so this is going to happen as we go through the story. We're going to hear about gods and demons taking over heaven and getting boons and kicking the gods out of heaven, and then Shiva wandering around with a dead body of his wife, and there's stories going to be mentioned, and then Parvati being born, and the gods the gods going into the Himalayas and doing austerity to get a vision of the Devī, and then they get the vision of the Devī and they pray to the Devī to please take birth, right? And so all those are important. These are the stories. These are the mythic stories of Hinduism, right? So they're all very important. They found the background of Hindu thought, but we're going to be focusing more. I'm going to try to focus on this kind of inner meaning, or what we're supposed to take of it as spiritual principles, not just stories, ancient stories, or maybe ancient history. That's harder to push, right? At least ancient stories, or what ancient people believed. That's all interesting, right? But what are we supposed to believe? What are we supposed to take from these stories? That's going to be our focus. And there's terms as the weeks go on. I'll introduce more Sanskrit terms on these principles of different types of levels of meaning of speech, the literal meaning, the allegorical meaning, the implied meaning, these type of things will have to be understood, right? So what is the text? We have to know what the text is saying, what the text is teaching, right? And then also next layer, what it's teaching us, what can we learn from the text? And then this requires a certain level of qualification, both of the person teaching. Of course, it's called the apta vakya, the authoritative, for somebody who's had authority to speak, this is not me, I'm not the authority, it's the scripture itself is the authority. In this case, the belief is that it's written by Vyasa, right? So the great sage, right? Or at least we can say historically it's written by the great scribes that composed, that put it in its present form, in the 14th, 15th, 16th century, like that. Or we could say the authority is a tradition itself of Shaktism that has come down in this particular lineage, was a non-dualistic yet devotional form of Shaktism, right? So we can say that with the authority, so that we know the authority of what we have to take the text seriously. We have to take the text as a source of divine knowledge. Otherwise, it remains close to us. It just becomes a text for analysis rather than something that can actually speak to spiritually, right? So the scriptures mentioned, and the tradition mentioned that the qualifications to read or to hear the text to get some benefit from it are also mentioned. I'll just mention them quickly. There's one, akanksha. Akanksha, this means a desire for learning, either for, everybody likes these top 4 reasons of whatever, everything's listed like this, right? Is you have to have a desire to learn. If you're not a desire to learn, no matter what the qualification of a teacher or the significance of your text has not much value, right? Then yogyata is the fitness. You have to be fit to learn. The desire is always not enough. You have to have certain qualifications, obviously. Then akshati is asakti, is devotion. And then tatparya jnana, which is an insight. And so insight comes, you have to, hearing these texts, you have to have enough you have to have some spiritual experience, spiritual practice and background understanding, that when you hear these things that they make sense to you and that some meaning blossoms within, right? If somebody mentions about, oh, all of a sudden somebody saw a divine light, and from that light it became overwhelmed with emotion and they couldn't, and their voices were choked, but then they remembered, they tried to recite verses they remembered and prayed this way. If you don't have any background experience in devotion and sadhana and yoga and meditation, and maybe even some emotions, spiritual emotions running through your system, these things, you can understand what they mean, but you don't really understand what they mean. The deeper insight won't be there. So looking at that, let's jump into verse 3. Let me go back to my share screen. Verse 2, verse 3. So Vyasa, there's a picture of Vyasa, the speaker, traditional speaker at least. All right, let's say Vyasa uvāca. So that's already, when you say Vyasa uvāca, you're claiming a certain type of divine authority, right? Vyasa is himself considered a partial incarnation, a kind of plenary incarnation of Vishnu, who originally, as the tradition believes, organized. Vyasa means to expound and to organize the scriptures. He then also organized the Vedas into 4 different parts, so the tradition says. Then he's attributed, the Mahabharata is attributed to him, and most of the Puranas are attributed to him. Many other texts, even later texts like Vedanta Sutra, the Brahma Sutra, which it's not written by Vyasa, not by this Vyasa, is attributed to Vyasa, because otherwise it doesn't have the same scriptural authority. Immediately position Vyasa said it, right? It was a different Vyasa. But anyways, so let's see what he has to say. Let me find my notes here. Dhany'osi, kṛta-kṛty'osi, śikṣit'osi, mahātma-bhiḥ, bhagyavān-asi, yad-devyāṃ, nirvyājā, bhaktirasti, sorry, my tongue not there. Well, this translation, or of course, like the main translation we're putting on the screen, is by C. Mackenzie Brown. From this version, many of you already have it, or versions of it. I've also given a PDF of it on the website of the verses, not of the full text, so you can, if you want to study it. Dhany'osi. So what is dhany'ah? Dhany'asi. Dhany'asi. Dhany'ah means you're blessed, and asi means you are. You are blessed. So this is now, he's speaking to the person who asked the question. What was his question? Let's go back. Remember the question. It's all very important, because this is to elicit this response. what thoughtful person ever would tell us more of these tales of Shakti, tell us more about Ma, right? That this is what gives immortality, not drinking nectar like the gods. Even the gods die. I want immortality, like that. So because of this, his response is, you are blessed. The symptom of his being blessed is this question, right? Such spiritual questions. You are blessed, and it says kṛta-kṛty'osi. You are kṛta-kṛty'ah, right? And then asi means you've accomplished what needs to be accomplished, right? So that's a beautiful line, right? In the there's a verse in the Bhagavad Gita. If you look in the Bhagavad Gita, if you want to do comparison, you can look up a line in chapter 15, verse 20, right? And it says, O Sin, I have shared this most secret principle of the Vedic scriptures with you, O sinless Arjuna. By understanding this, a person becomes enlightened and fulfills all that is to be accomplished. Here again, he used Syat kṛta-kṛty'osi cha bharata. O Bharata, you've by understanding this, you will attain everything that needs to be attained, right? The term itself also has a Vedantic pedigree also. Of course, it's in the Bhagavad Gita, but in the Panchadasi, an important Vedic text, right, by Vidyaranya, he mentions four qualities that come when one has attained the blissful state of Brahman, right? Because people claim all kinds of things. Actually, even when like in my line of work, right, we hear all kinds of things, people claiming all kinds of states of consciousness, right? And of course, the best thing is not to claim any state of consciousness or advertise it on your website or try to make a living on your state of consciousness. But even when somebody attains some, and they think, oh, I've attained some, I've attained something, right? And so there are symptoms. So the symptoms given in the Panchadasi are four. He uses kṛta-kṛty'ah, that's one. There's the same word as there, right? And that is, here it's kind of understood as having done what needs to be done. Everything you need to have done has been done, right? Dukkha bhava means that you have no suffering. All sense of misery is gone, right? Kamapti, attaining your desires, you attain your desires. This is interesting because Vedanta, if knowledge of Brahman, right, gives you, in the ancient world, understood actually you can fulfill your desire just by desiring it. Your desires will get fulfilled. If you have a desire, it will be fulfilled. But obviously, this has been a little bit refined in our understanding now, is that all your desires are fulfilled means you no longer have desires. By attaining, since the desire, knowledge of Brahman is what we really want, to use this language, you've fulfilled all your desires, all desires appear. But actually, in the older sense, this could actually probably have meant that anything you want, you get. You get those benefits. And then prapta-praptya, just like kṛta-kṛty'ah, prapta-praptya means you've attained what is to attain. So the same ideas is there. So you are blessed, and you are complete. He's translated as completely fulfilled. You've attained everything that needs to be attained. Of course, it's not. He may not have attained everything because he's still asking questions. But the fact that he's attained everything needful to ask this question, right? Many of us have not yet accomplish what needs to be done or experience what needs to be experienced that makes these questions, right, about spiritual life primary, right? There's one Swami, like we know, Swami Bhajanananda Tirtha. He has this great line. He uses this term. He says, when your desires and experiences are outlived with discretion, something like that. You know, you've gone through so much experience, right? You've experienced so many things, both material and spiritually and physical and emotional, everything, that now you're in a certain sense ready to speak, ready to think about some of these higher things in a certain sense. You are blessed, dhany'osi, kṛta-kṛty'osi, śikṣit'osi. And why are you blessed? Why are you fulfilled? Because you've been taught shiksha. śikṣit'osi. You have been taught by Mahatma, by great souls. You've heard this term Mahatma. We use it as a title for certain saints. For instance, we use Mohandas Gandhi was often referred to as Mahatma Gandhi, right? Mahātma-bhiḥ. You've been taught by great souls. And it was struck me 20-something years ago when I first read this translation. We give talks on this. That's interesting. He's translated it as those of great heart, rather than normally we translate it as great soul, right? So that's very interesting. We'll go back to, in a second, we'll go back to that. Actually, we'll talk about it now. Let's not go back to it before moving forward. Right. Where is it? So the Mahatma, great Maha, great Atma, soul, self. Atma means many things. It means soul, it means self, it means mind, it means body, it means ego. By use, it has to be understood and it's used. But usually Mahatma, we think, oh, the great soul. And it's become a title. And here it's used, I think, almost like a title of a saint or of a sadhu, right, over guru. And often, like in our sadhu world, in our sadhu bhasha, the sadhu has their own. Sadhus have their own language. They say, oh, when they'll ask you, oh, when did you become a Mahatma? Like going, well, I'm not a Mahatma. I mean, that's like somebody asking. Also, I've also been asked, oh, when did you become a saint? Like, I'm not a saint. We're not even close to being a saint. But by saint here means sadhu, and Mahatma also means sadhu. Right, so that's the common use, is that it's a title for somebody who becomes somebody who lives a sadhu life, or a spiritual person, or a saint of some sort. And so, but it may be something. It means something. It could mean something more. Why I think the Mackenzie Brown has used this term great heart, great-hearted, right? So we have to think who taught him. Who taught Janamejayas? Who is his teacher? Well, immediate teacher is Vyasa, but it's not. I mean, this isn't you were taught, not you're being taught by a great soul. The terms are in past tense. You've been taught, right? You've been blessed. You've been fulfilled, and you've been taught. It's in this. You've been taught. So it's not. Of course, that's also kind of like Vyasa wouldn't say that about himself. Oh, you're lucky you're being taught with such a great person like me. So who are the other teachers? So I mean, I was looking up a little bit some of the history of the king. But his father is a great soul. His father is King Parikshit, right? His grandfather is Yudhisthira, the incarnation of Dharma. His uncles are the Pandavas. Right, he grew up in a divine family. So we could maybe this refers he's been taught by this family, by this tradition, something like this, yeah. Or you could say a little bit like he's been inherited. Whoever has taught him, the fact that he's full of devotion and that he's asking divine questions, spiritual questions, showing that he's blessed, means whoever that he's been taught by great people who've taught him his inherited tradition of spiritual values, right, or of devotional values, right. And also, I was thinking over my morning coffee, just kind of nervous about today's. I'm always nervous about whatever I'm going to speak, right? It's like even that term Mahatma, great soul. The soul is not great or small, right? So what makes one a Mahatma? Right, one does not become a great soul, right? The soul is the same in everybody, right? What changes, if you think, oh, he's a Mahatma, why was Gandhi called a Mahatma? Why are gurus and saints and swamis and like sometimes addressed as Mahatmas? What changes? Their soul has not changed. Their soul, it hasn't gotten bigger or brighter. Something's changed, right? Their mind has changed. Their heart has changed. It's gotten bigger. That's become bigger. That's become greater. Right. What makes one a Mahatma? You'd think some experience, right? What is the experience? Experience of what? So what makes one, well, perhaps, I mean, we assume that it's the experience of the self, of God, of the goddess, something like this, right? Of liberation or some divine experience, right? That would make one, so one would be conscious of the one, right? The one within the many, right? That would make somebody broad-minded and large-hearted. Great heart, here it was of those of great heart, right? When you know the one, then you understand and have tolerance and vision to digest and understand and reciprocate with the many in a larger way, right? So we could say that of the changing, of the eternal within the changing, something like that. The one within the many, the eternal within the changing. This gives one great understanding. So many people claim, back to our this kṛta-kṛty'osi and the Panchadasi description of qualities of somebody who's experienced Brahman, many people claim a powerful divine experience, right? There's a lot of there's a lot of big personal claims, right? Religions are usually started in our normal. We often think of religion. Some of the big ones we think of are started by people who we believe claimed that they're very important. They have a unique experience. Maybe they've spoken with God. Maybe they are God. Maybe they're one with God, right? Maybe they're God's messenger. Maybe they're God's only messenger. Something like this, right? And so these are pretty strong claims that they require. I always think very big claims require big evidence, right? And the problem is that there's no evidence for such claims, right? Very often, right? But deep experience, we think if it's a deep experience, profound experience, it could make one great-hearted, large-hearted, broad-minded, right? Because it could break, we imagine, such the constraints of such limiting views, right? Sri Ramakrishna gave we use this example all the time. I think it's essential to understand Sri Ramakrishna's view of many things. And you've maybe heard me tell the story. There's a story of somebody somebody went out under a tree to go to the bathroom, and he saw an animal there. He saw a red animal. He came back and told his friends, I went under that tree and I saw a red animal. And his friend says, no, it's not a red animal. I also go to that tree. It's a blue animal. And somebody else says, no, it's a green animal. And everybody's making these different arguments. They start arguing. And somebody who lives under that tree hears them arguing and says, what are you guys arguing about? And he hears their arguments. He says, oh, all of you are right. Actually, I live under that tree and I know that animal really well, right? It's actually a chameleon. Sometimes it's red, sometimes it's blue, sometimes it's green, sometimes it has no color, sometimes many colors, right? So all of you are right, right? So in that story, the various people who saw the animal had some experience. They've had some religious, I mean, here the animal means God in the story, the metaphor, obviously, right? In this example. So they've experienced an actual animal, right? But their experience is not very deep, right? And they're overclaiming the claims of knowledge based on that experience are pretty exaggerated, right? Oh, I know what the animal is. I saw it. And it's true. They had some religious experience and they can trust their experience. And I guess you can trust your experience, right? And then the next generation of people, another category of people who believe them and follow them. They believe they're real, that they've had real experience. The followers, the disciples of such people, right? They themselves have not had the experience, but they're following what they think are great souls who've had that experience, right? But the Mahatma in the story, the Paramahansa, Sri Ramakrishna said, who lives under the tree, he has profound understanding. He has deep understanding. He has intimate understanding. Sri Ramakrishna described it as vijnana, right? A certain type of realized knowledge, mature realized knowledge. That and his response, rather than saying all of you are out to lunch and you're all wrong, right? He says, oh, all of you are right. He's broad. He makes them very large-hearted and seeing how they're right. They're not fully right, right? They're not. They have limited understanding, but they're right and have this broadness of heart. So he uses the term broadness of heart. I think is very interesting. So you are blessed. You are completely fulfilled. Why? Because you have been taught by these large-hearted, large, broad-minded, great souls, right? And we also hope that our august assembly here, our little gathering of devotees, are also being taught and have been taught by great souls, or following at least great souls, real Mahatmas. Bhagyavān-asi. Let me find my verses here. Second line. Bhagyavān-asi. You are, what else are you? You're also fortunate, right? And bhagyavan, you possess fortune. You are lucky, right? And that term bhagya is related to this term bhagavan, has the same, these divine qualities, these auspicious qualities. You're very lucky or fortunate. So when a great saint looks at you and says, you're blessed, you've done what needs to be done, you must have been taught by great people, right? And you are very fortunate. Of course, you are very fortunate, we know, because he's going to get a great message, right? But then he gives the condition for his fortune. Yad-devyāṃ nirvyājā bhaktihi astite. You why? Because you have nirvyājā bhaktihi. You have true or pure, unsullied, unmixed devotion for the goddess. Devyāṃ nirvyājā bhaktihi astite. You have devotion, you possess real devotion for the goddess. Of course, so this we can turn, even these verses were just are the setup for the frame story. It's not even the real frame story. It's a frame story for the secondary frame story in which finally the goddess will speak and get spiritual teaching. But even this sets it up of, there's a teaching here. We can turn this into what is the vṛttaṃ here? What is fortunate? What makes us fortunate? Bhakti makes us fortunate. Devotion, there's many definitions of lucky, right? Those who, successful, lucky in love, lucky in work, and in health and sports. There's all kinds of things you can use, different criteria, right? But this criteria is what to be described by a saint as you're very lucky, right? Because why? Because you possess devotion. That's what makes us blessed. That's what this is a result of being blessed, result of doing what needs to be done. This is a result of being taught by great souls, right? Our fortune comes from the fact that we have bhakti. And this also becomes the qualification, the adhikara, for hearing the Devi Gita, right? He hears the Devi Gita. He even wants to hear the Devi Gita, and therefore he hears the Devi Gita because he has devotion, right? And this nirvyājā, nir without, and vyājā, vy long a, j long a, my tongue's not doing it today, right? Vyājā means deceit or pretense or show, right? And so this means that your bhakti is without show. It's not pretentious, right? It's not at first I would think, nir means without other things mixed in. It's not showy, right? It's not, you're not pretending, right? Like this. You are, in other words, you say you are sincere. You're other words to describe this term is sincere, pure, honest, right? So these are wonderful. Each one of these words together, what does it mean? The bhakti for the goddess that makes us fortunate is sincere, pure, and honest, right? This is very, very nice. So what is the things that can make bhakti insincere, perhaps, if we can use that language, dishonest, or showy, perhaps, or hypocritical, or impure? Actually, I'm more focused on the term impure here in the shades of the meaning of the term, right? Because that's the term Sri Ramakrishna used considerably. He used this term that is śṛṇu bhakti, right? And Chaitanya uses terms like, it's not just devotion, right? And devotion has many meanings. It means dedication. I mean, all kinds of things, right? But pure love for the God, love for God, that's shuddha, pure. It means, and pure is something unmixed. What's it mixed with? Other motivations, right? And so we have all kinds of things that motivate our spiritual life, even our devotion. It could be, even the Gita mentions 4 types of people, or 5 types of people, 3 types of people. Embarrassing. Come to me or worship me. Those who are suffering, those who are looking for benefit, those who want knowledge. There's different ways. There's different reasons to approach, right? And many people, and even in the Vedic tradition itself, and there's the critique of some of the devotional schools and devotional Puranas will critique the Vedic ritual. Their critique of it, if it's meant to attain heaven or benefit on earth. And that is a major focus of Vedic rites in the Vedic world, is to attain success on earth and to attain heavenly rewards after. And then, of course, in many religions, we hear that also. You get blessings here, and then a divine or blissful afterlife. But this is not pure devotion. This is not Shuddha Bhakti as per the devotional traditions, right? The quote, I think maybe I put it here. I did. Swami Vivekananda. This is from Bhakti Yoga, his famous little book, Bhakti Yoga, based on some lectures, right? And the previous sentence, he mentions that many people hold the purpose of religion is to make people happy in this world also. And it is, I mean, it's natural to want to be happy, and we should be happy. I want all of you to be happy in this world, right? And be without fear, and have enough to eat, to be emotionally satisfied, like that, right? But that's not as presented in this category of text. This is not the final goal. So this is I'll just read it out loud. To men who never rise higher than eating, drinking, begetting, progeny, and dying, the only gain is sense enjoyments. And they must wait to go through many more births and reincarnations to learn to feel even the faintest necessity for anything higher. That term, Swami Bhajanananda said, is to experience many things with discretion, right? One has gone through them nicely, then higher ideas will sometimes bloom. But those whom the eternal interests of the soul are much higher value than the fleeting interests of this mundane life, to whom the gratification of the senses is like the thoughtless play of the baby, to them God and the love of God form the highest and the only utility of human existence. Thank God that there are still such living in this world of too much worldliness, right? And then in another point in the Bhakti Yoga, I just included this because it's a great definition of this ecstatic, pure devotion by Swami Vivekananda. Bhakti Yoga is a real, genuine search of the Lord, a search beginning, continuing, ending in love. One single moment of the madness of extreme love to God brings us eternal freedom. So this is the pure bhakti that perhaps is being mentioned here. So let's go on to the next verse 4 here. śṛṇu rājan-purā vṛttaṃ satī-dehe'gni-bharjite bhrāntaḥ śivastu bhabrāma kvacid-deśe sthiro'bhavat. Long A, short A, bhavat. Hear, O king. śṛṇu, this term you hear a lot. śṛṇu, listen carefully. Even when I first met my own guru, Swami Bhajanananda Saraswati Maharaj, he was in somebody's living room, and we're all waiting there, and this old sadhu in his 80s, 90s, early 90s, late 80s, comes, sits down, and the first thing he says is, my dear self, my own self in the form of sisters and brothers, or brothers and sisters, beautiful way to start. He says, I have no bookish knowledge, right? I have not read anything. I don't know any scripture. I have not studied in school. But I am telling my own life. He'd always start with his own experience, right? Then he says, please listen and hear me attentively, right? So whenever I hear this śṛṇu rājan, I said, please listen. Guruji said, please listen attentively, because I'm telling something important. This is important. Hear, O king. Here is a king, Raja-purā. This pura vṛttaṃ. Pura vṛttaṃ, this ancient, here it says this ancient, I like, that's a great beginning of a story. Listen to an ancient story. Of course, it is from the Devi Bhagavatam, which is supposed to have place, this conversation supposed to have taken place just after the Mahabharata war, between 1,200 years ago to 5,000 years ago, something like that. It's already an old story, but I'm telling a really ancient story. And the story is about Sati, Shiva's first wife, if you were to think of Shiva having a first wife, right? The Divine Mother's incarnation or manifestation of Shiva's wife as a daughter of Daksha, Sati. This ancient tale, so I was thinking ancient tale, this Pura also means previous tale, right? Because the story just before the Bhagavad, the Devi Gita, right? Just the previous chapter, not even 2 chapters, right, is about the story of Sati, right? So here, this ancient tale, when Sati was consumed in the fire, was told, I don't know, 7 minutes ago or something like that. So it could just be. I'm also telling you the previous. I'm giving a focus on this previous story, right? You asked about about this light that just appeared, and the god saw this the divine as this pillar of light, as this param maha, in the previous in the first 1 and 2, right? To understand that, one has to remember a previous tale. So the previous tale is the ancient tale, this ancient story, or the one I just mentioned. I'm gonna bring your attention to a few more details of that. But also, in order to understand anything, you have to. This is the nature of a Purana. To understand anything, you have to understand another story, and to understand that story, you have to understand another story. There's stories within stories within stories, right? So, what is that ancient tale? When the body of Sati was consumed in flames, satī-dehe'gni-bharjite. What is it? Satī-dehe'gni-bharjite, right? When Sati, Deha is her body, means body, right? Deha body, Dehe in the body, right? Dehe, Agni, fire, right? And Bharjite, burned or fired, fried. That's a perfect, actually, it's a good word. Actually, I was thinking my joke name in India, and once the Swami, they call me Begum Bhajananda, right? Begum means eggplant, and bhaja means to fry, right? And so I'm one who gets great happiness and bliss from eating fried eggplant. This is their joke. I actually like Begum Bhaja, Bengali, or Begum Bhaja. So they love it. It's just, so if you want to charm swamis that don't like you, you immediately make a joke like this and they immediately like you. So this is my awkward social technique of making people like me, right? But this term bhaja is the bhara. It comes to fry, to cook. They kind of like fried things also, bhaje. But so there's obviously the ancient story is that Sati, who we mentioned in the previous chapter, was consumed in the flames, and in that story, Pura vṛttaṃ. It's also, I want to mention, it's told in the story is also told in the Mahabharata, so it is an old story, right? You find it in a very popular form in the Mahabharata. The form that I'm most familiar with, it's quite elaborately told in the Srimad Bhagavatam, the Vaishnava text. It's told very elaborately, very beautifully also. So I've given from several months discussions on it years ago. So I spent a lot of time analyzing and thinking and finding the symbolism, the meaning, and inspiration from that version, right? And it's it's told in the previous chapter of the Devi Bhagavatam. So in the Devi Bhagavatam, in the previous chapter, it's not told very elaborately, right? It's told, and not a lot of details given. It mentions that Daksha, the father, the Prajapati Daksha, the son of Brahma, one of the progenitors of mankind. He's the kind of the progenitor of the Brahminical culture, right? One of the there's different Prajapatis that go to create different parts of society. He creates the Brahminical culture and the kind of the rules of Brahminical society and morality and like that. That's what he represents, right? And it's due to some sexual misconduct. because there's nobody to create, his own daughter. Anyway, the story is there, but it barely told. But because of this, it simply mentioned that Sati consumed herself in the yogic fire. Yogagnina, yogagnina, inner fire, this inner fire of yoga. So in the more elaborate story in the Srimad Bhagavatam, Prajapati doesn't really like Shiva, but Sati marries Shiva. She falls in love with Shiva due to destiny. And he, due to all kinds of past history, doesn't like Shiva because he believes Shiva insulted his father Brahma. There's a lot of stories like that. But really it's become, in the story, a tension between Daksha, meaning this Brahminical society, and Shiva, who does not fit that society. He breaks that society. He lives on the outskirts of society. And very likely also, I mean, his characters, he's probably even a deity of a non-Brahminical deity, non-Vedic deity, should I say, I'm sorry, that you know, and even now we think he's covered in ashes, he smokes ganja, he lives in cremation grounds, he's surrounded by ghouls, right? He doesn't live in a house, he has unkept hair, covered in ash, you know, all this cremation ashes. So he's already, all the things that Brahminical culture holds sacred, he flaunts, and all the things the Brahminical culture thinks are impure and immoral, he does, represents, right? So there's going to be a tension in that. And eventually the tension got so bad where he purposely, in order to insult Shiva and to insult Sati, his own daughter who married Shiva, he performs a big fire sacrifice, and he invites all the gods, all the goddesses, all the apsaras and gandharvas and kinadas, all the semi-divine beings, and doesn't invite Shiva and doesn't invite his own daughter, in a way of showing great disdain publicly, to not invite somebody to a party. The only purpose of the party is to not invite somebody, to let them know they're not invited. So Sati goes anyways, against Shiva's, some versions say against Shiva's wish, others Shiva had to accept it because he knew the divine destiny. She goes, and when she realizes that what has happened and that this is purposely to insult Shiva, right? She being the wife of Shiva, and Sati has come to mean a devoted wife, is a Sati, as a word for one of the meanings of Sati, right? That some versions of the story have her, and the way we understand it, she jumps in the fire of Daksha's sacrifice and consumes herself, and then Shiva gets very upset, and he sends an incarnation, a parsha called Virabhadra and Bhadra Kali, and slaughters everybody in the sacrifice, cuts off the head of Daksha and throws, and it's very dramatic and violent story of these two worlds clashing. And then eventually things calm down and he brings everybody back to life, and Nandi intercedes, and there's a whole story, right? But in some version, I really think, oh, she burns herself in the fire. But here it says Yogagnina, Yagnina, he burns herself in her own fire, right? So I like this, she doesn't jump into a fire pit. She closes her eyes and awakens her inner fire. We commonly call it Bhutagni. Okay, we have Bhutagni, we have an energy of fire within us, an energy within us, right? But of course, she's a goddess, so her energy is the fire, right? If she consumes, and it says that Shiva, when he got there, found her. Of course, if either he picked up her ashes or picked up her charred body or just her dead body, which is the way of how the text actually just says he picked up her dead body, and then he wandered in grief throughout the three worlds, right? And in his grief, holding over his shoulders or in his arm the dead body of his wife, right? Lamenting and crying. And it says the gods got so scared because when Shiva gets angry or Shiva goes mad, you know, he's God, he's the self of all, everything gets agitated. And partially out of concern for him, to keep the cosmic flow going and for the good of the world, it says Vishnu, either some versions with his chakra began to cut up Sati's body, or with his arrows began to cut up Sati's body, and different parts of the body began to fall And slowly, eventually, Shiva, her body fell to earth in different places, and those became known as the Shaktipetums. And also in the previous chapters of the Devi Gita describes 108 of these Shaktipetums. There's different lists, different texts have different lists. The classical list is 50 or 54. This text says 108, describes. And actually in two classes in our Hindu goddess class, we'll talk about the Shaktipetums and pilgrimage. This becomes a main understanding of goddess pilgrimages in India. At any given time, millions of people are going from one Shaktipet or to a Shaktipet, to these ancient places of Devi worship. And it says where her body fell, Shiva in some form went there and meditated, right? Mm-hmm. And would go and meditate in that place. So it says, "Hear, O king, this ancient tale, when the body of Sati was consumed in flames, the bewildered Shiva wandered about, falling here and there, motionless on the ground." Right? Bhrāntaḥ Shiva. Shiva was Bhrāntaḥ, bewildered. Right, and we know we mentioned in our last class on Sunday that in the Chandi we're talking about Devi Mahatmyam, Yadevi Sarvabhuteshu Bhrantirupena Samsita, right? That goddess who exists in all beings, even in the form of confusion or bewilderment or like this. So here Shiva himself has become bewildered when it was Devi's loss, right? And he wandered about, falling here and there on the ground, right? From place to place, he's falling, right? I'll bring this next verse, and then I think we're not going to get, I prepared 14 verses. We're not going to get 14 verses. We'll get 5 maybe. We'll end here. This beautiful painting, right, is that of Nandalal Bose, a beautiful Bengali painter, who did an incredible series on the life of Anandamoy Ma. If you could look up Anandamoy Ma on Google and look up Nandalal Bose, you get to see exquisite paintings. All of his paintings are so beautiful. But this shows Shiva sitting here. I mean, instead of wandering, but with Parvati, with Sati's body, right? It says, Prapanchamana rahita samadhigata manasaha dhyana devi sarupantu kala ninyesa atmavan. We'll end with this verse. Prapanchamana rahita. Prapancha is the visible, means this visible world. Right, prapancha meaning the objective, the world that we can perceive as the senses, right? Something like that. Manarahita, mana met his mind, right, and rahita left, devoid of, unaware of what, he became unconscious of the material world. And of course, we want to be unconscious of the material world. I mean, maybe in times of meditation, not all the time. We have to also open our eyes and deal with the divine reality at hand, right? But when Shiva closes his eyes, or Shiva doesn't see the world, something happens. And this is maybe we can say this is a interpretive tool or principle or that in mythology, right? If you're to look at the Shiva myth, I hate to use this word in the wrong way, I mean, misunderstood. But Shiva is, especially in Tantra, like Shiva and Devi is, Shiva is consciousness and Devi is the manifestation of the Shakti, right? Kind of using the Purusha Prakriti idea, the Shiva and Shakti, or consciousness, or Brahman, or consciousness and its manifestation, right? And in many of the stories, when Shiva closes his eyes, right, it means he does not see the world. What is this world? This world is Devi. This world is Shakti. That means he's not, of course, he lost the body of Shakti, of his wife, Sati, who is the Parashakti, his own Shakti. So he doesn't see her, right? Which also means he doesn't see her. It means he doesn't see her in this world. He doesn't see the external world, right? And when Shiva doesn't see the world, just like in the Sankhya language, when Purusha isn't close to Prakriti, Prakriti doesn't vibrate and everything freezes. And therefore you see Shiva in a mountain, he closes his eyes, his both feet in meditation, right? Means not touching the earth, right? Both in Padmasana, right? Not touching the earth, eyes closed, internal. What happens? Snow, rivers freeze, plants die, nature doesn't vibrate. There's no life, doesn't. But when he sees the material world, when he sees material world as an expression of Devi, then rivers flow, plants bloom, fields grow. There's this one way of interpreting the one way of understanding the Shiva opening his eyes. So Ma, when Shiva's with Devi, he's seeing Devi, and therefore, and in the stories, he becomes a householder, and he loves Devi, and they have love play, and they have children, and they keep the world show going. But when she disappears, his response is, "Fine, I don't see her, I won't see her." And also, what do you do if you don't want to see? Yeah, I'll find her within, right? I'm not going to see her. She died, therefore I'm not going to see her. She's not outside. I don't relate to her anymore. I shall find her within. So his mind he was unaware of the material world, of the manifested world, his mind being fully absorbed. Here's Samadhi Gatta Manasaha. Samadhi Gatta Manasaha. Manasaha, right? He became, Gatta Manasa means to get gone or fallen or disappeared, lost in Samadhi. And Samadhi could mean just not conscious of the material world. Somebody could just be a term like that, but we have to assume that this is intentional, right? That he's in Samadhi, right? It means this is in a certain sense, a lot of us are trying to attain, those in the yogic tradition especially, want to attain Samadhi. We want nirvikalpa Samadhi, right? We want, and what is nirvikalpa Samadhi? Even the Devi herself will describe later in 5th or 6th chapter of the Devi Gita, we'll get there eventually, right? Not at this speed, I don't know when at this speed, but we'll get there eventually. She herself will describe Samadhi is that when one contemplates experientially the identity between the individual soul and Brahman, when that is Samadhi. So maybe this is that by being that, 100 verses later, Devi herself is going to define Samadhi this way, and here the term Samadhi could be this way also, that his mind in Samadhi. Dhyanam Devi Swarupam tu. So what did he do? He passed the time. Tu kalam ninye saha. He passed the time doing what? Dhyanam, dhyayan Devi Swarupam. Right. He contemplating the dhyayan, meditating Devi, goddess, means Sati, but not just Sati, not because Sati's gone, the goddess, Swarupam, her essential nature, her own nature. Swarupa means one's own form, but here Swarupam usually means your own nature. So it could be, and I think Professor Mackenzie Brown, he says that sometimes Swarupam in the Devi Bhagavatam itself or in the Devi Gita refers to the supreme goddess of her original form, her real form, her Swarupa is goddess Bhuvaneshwari. Bhuvaneshwari is the goddess of the Devi Bhagavatam, and it's the goddess of the Devi, the one who appears in the story and teaches the Devi. When we hear the Devi Gita, the teachings of the goddess, which goddess? Bhuvaneshwari, supreme ruler of the world, right? Bhuvaneshwari, and that's a very specific form. She has 4 arms, a particular iconography form. So some have said, it's that he's just meditating on the form of the goddess. But I think the way I've always understood this verse, I've been thinking about this verse for many years, is that she's meditating on the Devi's essential nature as consciousness, as the universal energy, the unmanifested form, right? Not necessarily the form that manifests, because she's not, it's not her form as Sati or Parvati or some other form, because she died, right? Sati died, right? Or disappeared, right? Or withdrew her body. And it's not her form as Yadevi Sarvabhuta, as existing in all beings, as Nama Rupa, name, form, causation, the Shakti, like that, because he's closed his eyes, has not seen it. right? So he's meditating on her essential nature, which is consciousness before manifestation within his own being, right? Closing his eyes, he meditates on her like this, right? Meditate on her essential nature. And in many stories, and like if you've seen the 1,000 episodes of Devankhi Mahadev, like we did a couple summers ago, right? That's a big theme that whenever the time when Shiva, after Sati died, Shiva, he's like, I don't need her externally, right? If you have her externally, she only brings pain. I shall find her within. And you can see this is a very monastic attitude, right? God may be this world, but it sucks as this world, right? It's temporary. This world is temporary. It's not satisfying. It's never what we want. If we get it, we lose it. We're not happy because we want it. We're not happy if we get it, we lose it. Losing it makes us unhappy. It's never as good as we thought. You know, all the different categories of material experience, right? And therefore, a very classic monastic sadhu type of thing is like, well, screw it, right? I'll just find everything I need within. And Shiva is the Lord of such yogis, right? You know, we have Ash. I'm wearing his rupa. You know, we dress like Shiva and trying to think, oh, because he's our king. He's the king of yoga. He's our hero, right? This moment, he's our hero because here he closed his eyes and finding Devi within. We also want to close our eyes and find Devi within, right? But he doesn't stay in this form. He eventually, Devi does get born again, does manifest again as Parvati, right, in the story, right? And he does open his eyes. He does see her face to face. He does relate, and thus he does love her personally. And that love play between Shakti and Shiva, they'll go to create the world and go, and you know, and he engages the world and enlivens the world with spirituality, right? So it's but this moment, this verse is this moment of Shiva's meditation when he's lost Devi. Devi has the external form has only brought pain for him, right? So he says, I don't need her. I need her, but I don't need her, right? I'll find her within, right? So this is and also this is another tension, is that we have the tension between Shiva and Daksha, between the Brahminical culture and the yogi freedom and what Shiva represents, and you have another tension between the ascetic and the householder, the withdrawn, eyes closed, eyes open, nirvikalpa, savikalpa samadhi, right? Finding Devi within only, or seeing and relating to Devi without, respectfully and lovingly, right? So this is a tension like that. So it's, let me see what the next verse is. Okay, so during this time, let me check my notes before I move forward. In my note it says, grief led Shiva to withdraw his mind. The world was empty without her, seeking her within, right? And so that is a good emphasis. This is actually a good emphasis, a good motivation for many people, including myself, and maybe including you, right? To withdraw the mind, right? Because we grief sometimes, suffering, whatever the cause of suffering, leads us to go within sometimes, right? And the world is empty without her, right? And what we're seeking in the world is her, right? And that's the great mystery. Our Guruji used to say that unseen power is manifesting as everything, as everybody. The problem is we don't see her. We see everything. She's everything and everybody, but we see everything and everybody and not her, right? And that causes suffering, right? So the secret is how to see her in everything and everybody. Yad-devyāṃ sarvabhūteshu. Namaste, namaste, namaste. We bow, we bow, we bow. That's a secret. We want to live we want to see her with eyes closed. We want to see her with eyes open. We want, so this verse can also be seen as a stage of motivation, right? Suffering in the world, disappointments in the world lead us to search within. And we should, even Shiva has to search within. But Sri Ramakrishna said, the Vijnani, right? Going back to Sri Ramakrishna, he says that in the beginning, one thinks God alone is real, the world is not real, right? But so that's the stage, right? Right. But then one realizes, the Vijnani, after realization, one comes to understand the truth, which is not that at all. That's motivation, not realization. The realization is God has become everything, including the world, right? But that's perhaps our philosophy and this text is going to state that up front. God has become everything. But we still have to do a little bit of renunciation. Even Shiva has to, right? In order to say, we have to, because we lose her in the many instead of see her in the many. Once you know what you look for, once you find her, once you taste her, once you know what to search for, you'll catch her face in every, you'll notice her everywhere. You'll see her. Our Guruji said you'll find her hiding in everything, right? Swami Lakshmaju, I think, used this term like peekaboo almost. She's playing this game of hide and seek with us. Maybe hide and seek, maybe better. And that becomes very exciting. So in this state, Shiva, Sati has withdrawn, right? Even Shiva is bewildered, what to speak of everybody else. Shiva has closed his eyes. We don't have Shiva's attention. And Shakti has withdrawn from the world, and Shiva has closed his eyes. Think about the state of situation. Shiva's not paying attention to us, right? And so we don't find, and Devi, Shakti, the one, our mother, the Parameshwari, the mother of the world, right? Jaganmata is nowhere to be found, right? In such a situation, bad things can happen. Right? Maybe we've tried to find a deep meaning in these verses. I think I can relate to. I mean, I'm not going to reveal too much of my own biography, and I'm not going to ask your own biography beyond general things, right? But I can relate to this moment also, right? Then that when we don't have Shiva. And we don't have connection with spirit, and we don't see the mother, right? We don't see our mother, right? You know, that's a dangerous situation. In such a situation, it says something happened. A demon came up, as I thought I was going to get to. We'll get to next week. A demon comes named Tarakasuda. He gets a special boon. To respond to him, Devi will take birth again in the material world as Parvati, but before then, we'll have this beautiful scene of those teachings of the Devi Gita before we can get there. But we'll leave it there. Let me close this here. Let me double check I didn't leave anything out with these notes, so I don't count. That's good. I think we're good. So stop share. Hari Om, Hari Om, Hari Om. Hari Om Tat Sat, Shri Guru Maharaj Ji ki jai, Mahamaya ki jai, Swami Maharaj Ji ki jai, Ma Dakshineshwari Dakshina Kali ki jai, Bhuvaneshwari Devi ki jai, Sati Mata ki jai. I forgot to mention Sati itself. I have it in my notes. Sati means Satya, comes from Satya. Satya means the truth. You know, she is the essence of truth is Sati. So anyway, we'll weave that into next week's discussion. Are there any comments or questions? Vehement disagreements? You can unmute yourself and ask, or if Ramakrishna is there, he can go through. I can't follow the text, you know, the conversation while I'm talking, so I'm behind on that. So if there's any, let me move out of this mode. Hari Om, Hari Om, Hari Om. Swamiji, any questions that needs to be?
No questions per se. Yeah.
Just nice statement. Anybody on your side? Anybody in the gallery, our august assembly of rishis and kings? I've been talking for an hour and 18 minutes. You guys got to say something.
Swamiji, I have a question for you.
Yes.
Is there the Devi Gita, is there a transliteralized version? Like, you know how you have the Devanagari and then
yeah. So the only version I know in transliteration, I'm working on one. That's why you see the verses I've been doing, right? Now I have to reverse engineer these later chapters. I also have the Devanagari. These are first chapters. I can't, I'm not good enough to reverse engineer and create the Devanagari, which I'd like to have all together. But I think from chapter 2 or 3, I think I also have the Devanagari. But Swami Bhajanananda Saraswati from I mentioned, I don't think he liked the translation, right? But he starts in a weird place. It's 2, 3. It's not the normal chapters. So I think his chapter 1 maybe starts chapter 3 or something. But he has, I don't even know if it's in print anymore. It's in one of the early books. I haven't seen it online or something, or maybe it's still available on Amazon. But he has the Devanagari and the transliteration. And what I've been finding, there's mistakes in I don't know, as far as I know, I mean, I'm not expert enough, but comparing it, he has the, in this version, there's a Devanagari in the back, right? And for my ability to compare, I'm finding some mistakes, but at least it's something if you want to look at the verses. But also maybe I'll post the Devanagari, the transliteration of the first chapter on the website, so you could have it. You don't have to buy a book on Amazon that's not that good or something, so you can, I'll just give you that, the Devanagari for now. But as I'm going through these verses to prepare, with Swami Ambhikananda's help, we're also correcting it, making sure that it matches the version, the pretty good version in the back of this book. Yeah.
Thank you, Swamiji.
Problem.
Thank you.
How do you?
Thank you.
Anybody else? Oh, I'm not going to call anybody, but maybe next week I'm going to start calling people and put you on the spot. Somebody's such an incredible artist. I checked many of his arts. I really like. I'm good. Yeah, he's very good. Okay. Well, I guess that's it then. Anybody? So
One question.
Oh, yes, Tommy.
From Ron Mali. You have your hand up?
I have another question. But I don't want to ask it if anyone else has a question.
Nobody's asked you the question. You're all we got.
In verse 2, I know we talked about the Titri, the Upanishads, the waking, dreaming, and then the different states, and then Aum and the Chatruti.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's just more of like an epistemological, like axiological question. So when they talk about Om, and you talk about the origins, how it became to signify the sealing of the beginning of, like, when you recite the Vedas, when the law of Manu, he says at the beginning of the Vedas, you have to say Om.
Yes.
I was just, can you just address that? Because like reading the stories from the Yajurveda and then the Brihad, Aranyaka, Upanishads, you have all these different things as it being the form of an ascent, or so be it. That's
just there are statements that Om means yes, right? So that it's that's overly simplistic, right? But Om is a sense. Sometimes when people say Om, they mean they're agreeing with what you said, right? It's like and in even in the Durga, when we do Durga Puja, we don't do this. I mean, it's in my large puja, even like for like an Amavasya puja, but I don't always do it. But during Durga Puja, I don't leave it out. Where you you make a statement and you say, "I'm doing this auspicious puja, right? May benefit come to it, right?" And then you call out, "May the assembled Brahmins say Om." Meaning, like, make it be so. Anyway, with the priests and the assembled the holy people, they say Om is like going, "May it be so." May it be so, right? And I mean, we do it. We do the. I mean, if we were in a if I had choreographed it properly, I'd say the verse, and other people would say Om, and people would say Swasti, and they say different words of assent. right, during this episode. So it even fitted into our puja, into certain pujas, you know, this idea. But you know, it's like different Upanishads will describe Om differently. And you mentioned the Mundakya Upanishad is a short Upanishad, I believe, that deals primarily with Om and the 3 letters of Om. And so, and I think, I don't have my notes immediately in front of me from last week, but we're talking about the 4th state, right? I think it's what's referring to that, the Maha, maybe I do have my notes here. Verse 1, I believe. Yeah, that idea that the 4th state. And so some texts will connect the letters of Om to the states of consciousness, but actually Om, it's going to, because it's made of 3 letters, the way it's analyzed, right? It's going to represent very easily, if people who want to use it and connect their philosophy or the thing like that to the prestige of this pristine Vedic mantra, right, of the Omkara, right? They're gonna, so it becomes Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva. It becomes creation, sustenance, and destruction. Becomes this waking, dreaming, and dreamless sleep. It means past, present, and future. It means subject, object, and relationship. It means all these different sattva, rajas, and tamas. It means Brahma, Saraswati, Lakshmi, and Parvati. Icha Shakti, Kriya Shakti, Jnana Shakti. That means will, knowledge, and action, right? So all these triune things, right, are going to be attributed to, connected to the Omkara. But each of these triune things, right, has a 4th. That's why in the Chandi, that opening in the Brahma Sutta we mentioned briefly in Sunday's class, right? It says where it says Tvam Swaha, Tvam Swadha, Tvam Hi. You are these Vedic mantras, and then it says you are the 3 sounds. You are the 3-lettered mantra, meaning Om, right? And its secret 4th mode, and its 4th, and the secret or silent 4th, and its hidden form of recitation or of meditation. And I quoted in verse last week, this that Omkara Bindu Samyuktam, with Bindu. So the idea that whatever in the sound of right, there's something from which the Om comes and which it goes. And therefore in all these trinities, past, present, and future, creation, sustenance, everything comes out and goes into something. And that coming out and going into something is still there at all times, unchanged. That is a chaturti or turiya, the 4th state, right? So the state, waking, dreaming, and dreamless sleep. You wake up, you dream, you go to sleep, but then there's something from which these come and go, and that's consistent through all the states. And so my own Guruji, Swami Vishwananda, I remember, it's very interesting, I have to say a little bit embarrassing, because it was like one of my last meetings with him, and I didn't fully appreciate, that was my last meeting with, I didn't fully appreciate it, where he was explaining to me the secret of Om, of a mantra, and how Om and all mantras come out of silence and go into silence, right? And that the focus should be the silence from which sound comes, exists, and disappears is God, right? The Omkar is the expression, but the silence you have to find, right? And in my mind, because of other training and other thinking, you know, more than self-realized 90-year-old saints, right? You think, oh, that's not what mantra is. And mantra is the name, and what a name points to. That's all true, but he was giving an inner secret, right? Of and even there's the great scene. Many of you may have known, if you know about the life of Ramana Maharshi, that for many years he was in silence, right? And he didn't speak, or very rarely spoke. He mostly wrote down teachings, and most people's questions were answered in silence. But it says that that great disciple Ganapati Muni, Mahavira Ganapati Muni, he went to him and says, Guruji, Maharishi, I've chanted every mantra. I know the Veda. He had chanted by 10, like millions of mantras. I memorized the Vedas. I've done tapasya. He's done a lot, but I don't know what tapasya means. And then please tell me, what is tapasya? What is austerity? What is real austerity? And Ramana Maharishi, I'm paraphrasing a little bit, but he says, when you say a mantra, right, the silence in which the mantra comes, in which it exists, in which it again disappears into, know that is tapas. He says, when a thought arises in the mind, the thought rises and again goes in where it then disappears into when it's finished, right? Know that is tapas, right? The same teaching, right? To know so Sri Ramakrishna used also this way of meditating on Om to get you to the source of it. He says, like it's like when you hit a gong, dum, we can follow the sound, right? Where does it disappear to? You don't know where it eventually disappears. It disappears from which it came, into the silence. But we don't know where that's at. We miss the sound. We can holding on that sound, we can follow it into the silence, right? And he used another example, japa of meditation and Om, another thing is like having a chain to tied to a treasure in the river. You can go holding that chain link by link. You can go all the way down against the current in a certain sense and find the treasure, the thing where the chain is coming from, link by link. So there's a long tradition of Om being the three states of everything, right? But the real power of Om is not just in those three, but from whence it comes, right? And it's so beautiful because Om and holy sound and holy thoughts and holy mantras, all sound, all thoughts, all words come, exist, and disappear into the silence of Brahman, right? Into the silence of the self, right? But certain sounds are really pure and they're sacred to us. They're not, and therefore we take them really seriously and we can focus on them with devotion, right? And they're suited for such meditation, right? You should be able to follow any sound, any thought, or see the gap between thoughts and between sounds, and know. In this, back to our verses, the Shiva, and so Shiva is the silence, Shakti is its manifestation. We can know Shiva by following the manifestation back to its original source, something like that. So I don't know if that answers, but it's something.
Guruji.
I got inspired just thinking about it. I don't know if it answers anybody's question, but go ahead.
Ellen Ma has a question.
Thank you so much.
Who has a question?
Ellen Ma.
Ellen, Jai Ma.
Swamiji, can you post in the classroom the 4 qualities that makes one prepared?
Yeah. I can easily copy and paste. I'll post that. The 4 qualities. Which 4 qualities? Can we mention several federal lists?
Yogyata.
Okay. Oh yeah. The qualities that make one a qualified student.
Yes.
Yeah. So that list is specifically mentioned. I skipped about because I realized, like all my introductions take up all the time, my allotted time, right? I never get to the verses, right? But it's actually describing the nature of understanding Puranas, but not what's agamas. The tantra, the agamas, and Puranas in a certain sense, in that same category of stated by great saints and heard by faithful people that are qualified. So the speaker has to be qualified. Anything spoken by a qualified person is listed in some definitions as agama, right? And therefore and especially if it's about things we cannot know otherwise, right? Until so that still requires the shabda pramana, the evidence of somebody of a divine authority. But it requires both a qualified person to speak, right? Here Vyasa and Devi, right? Or maybe or guru or some saint, right? And it requires the right listener, and therefore that these 4, I'll mention these, I'll post today itself, the 4 qualities on the classroom page. Anything else?
I have a quick question, Swamiji.
Yes.
Oh
yes. Okay.
So, hi. So when Shiva was walking with Devi and I was holding her, and it was so, oh my gosh, my heart. But when she fell, he said he walked through the 3 worlds, right?
Mm-hmm. He walked through Mm-hmm.
When she fell, did any of her fall in a world that wasn't this one?
That's a good question. The classical list, the classical list of 50 or 54, you can go to all 50 of them. They're in this realm, right? But in the chapter previous to Devi Bhagavatam, it has a different list of 108, right? And I haven't looked at that list in 20 years. I mean, I skipped it because I've been focusing on what I'm going to speak about, right? So, but actually we'll look at the list because in 2 weeks we have a talk on the Shaktipetums. So maybe the Shaktipetums will be, that's that. And you know, there's a clever title. I didn't come up with it. It's from a previously published book, Remembering the Goddess. You saw that? That's the chapter, right? Pilgrimage in the Shaktipetums, remembering because she's been membered. You know, so it's a play of the members of the cutting up the body. I'm not clever enough to come up with that. Adi told me, he showed me the book it comes from. He said you should use this as the title. I said, okay. Remembering the Goddess, right? About but there may be places, you know, because there's so many stories where scenes happen in not just this realm. So there may be Shaktipetums in the higher realms and in the lower realms mentioned in the text, right? But it's really, I mean, I don't want to overspeak on the Shaktipetum because then I won't have anything to say on next.
Thank you, Swami Ji.
But if you're interested, I'll tell you one thing about that. One of the powerful things about the Shakti, and the real purpose of the stories of the Shaktipetum is to graph, right, this divine stories and mythologies and divine worlds onto the earth, onto our geography, right? So now our world becomes a divine world. Right, and that's also a really important point, actually. Actually, I mean, I have a note in one of the other verses to talk about this, but about this of you know, we have this idea, we have as above, so below. That's you know, the idea, right? And that's something, and this is every spiritual culture believes this, right? That this world as it is here is a result, it's patterned after the spiritual realm. We look up at the skies and see our world reflected, right? You know, and then we can say, oh, things that are wrong in this world are because of the problem in the upper worlds, right? And therefore we see, we're suffering because the gods are also suffering, right? We're rejoicing because the gods are rejoicing, right? So people like Eliade would use this idea, right? The divine reveals itself as culture, but then you have other sociologists that see that our view of heavens and the heavenly worlds are our world projected up. So there's a line that says, "So below, as below, so above," right? We look up and see, you know, we look up and assign to the stars our world, right? We have a king, therefore we imagine there's a king in heaven, as if a medieval government system, some another is the divine reality, right? Or if corn's really important to us, we look up and see corn, right? You know, it's like, you know, there's a thing about that also. So it's a very interesting play that, and so the Shaktipetums really put these two together in a certain way, where it makes this world and the divine world mix in a very unique way. We don't need to go to heaven. Right, we can go down the street and find her and see like her.
The microcosm and the macrocosm, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Like what happens on one is.
Yes. So we'll. I'm glad you brought it because it just my warm up is. I've been scared of what to say about it, but my warm up has given me some ideas. So I can't wait to speak on it.
I'm excited.
It's a really interesting topic for me. So two very different approaches to society and religion and religious views. So Mariom. Anybody else? Okie dokie then, I guess that's it. We salute everybody with loving affection. Jai Mahatmaram, nice to see you. Sundari, who do we have? Alex, Jayama, Raimi, Ellen, Ananda, Andabai, Shelby. So, there you go. We can see you. That's great. That's great. Heather, Daima, Durgadasi, Daima, and the other guy next to you. Daima, Premdara, Reverend Zoe. We didn't see you. We're very happy. Actually, we mentioned last week that the idea for this class came from Giri, but in a discussion with Reverend Zoe, right?
Yay.
I made the commitment. I go, and I think this is a good thing. I think this is what we need to do.
Yay.
So you're on the
Yay.
two of you from two different sides poking that gave me some courage to do this again.
Happy to.
Jai Ma, Jai Ma.
Thank you. Jai Ma.
Jai Ma. Carolyn, Catherine, Jai Ma, Jai Ma.
Jai Ma, Jai Ma.
I didn't see you there, Jai Ma.
Jai Ma.
I wasn't in this mode, so now I'm seeing who's on my screen as people. Jai Ma, I'm glad to see you. Jai Ma. You're in San Diego County, right? Where are
What's
you?
that? I'm sorry.
Where are you right now?
New Jersey.
In New Jersey.
Oh my God.
In my brain, I just put you in San Diego. You're in New Jersey.
Oh, that's okay.
Great. I won't say anything.
Yep.
I'm not
Opposite end.
That's right, New Jersey. Hari Om, Hari Om, Hari Om. All right. Jai Guru, Jai Ma, Jai Guru, Jai Ma. Hari Om, Tat Sat. Hari Om, Hari Om, Hari Om. Jai Ma, Jai Ma. Good night. Shubho Ratri.